everyone. Welcome to another CrowdLinker Fireside Chat. I'm Aram Melkoumov, the host. Thanks for tuning in. On the show, I'm interviewing innovation leaders who are working on big industry problems from within their large organizations. My guests have been in the trenches and have lots of practical advice to share about building quality digital products, staying agile, and fostering an innovation culture within an enterprise. This is episode number 9, and I'm here with Shelly Bardai to talk about design thinking at KPMG Innovation. Quick background on bio on Shelly. So Shelly is part of the senior leadership team at KPMG Ignition. As the innovation and technology senior manager, she leads the center with a focus on growth and innovation strategy for KPMG clients. She transformed an innovation center at KPMG from the inception to realization and helped to develop the go-to-market strategy. Shelly has spent 10 plus years working in technology, including ACTIVE and NBC Universal, and at a Vancouver-based startup. So she plays an active role in the community, supporting a number of different initiatives, including as the Vice President of TEDxVancouver, and she sits on the advisory board for Game Changers and co-lead for KPMG's Women and Technology community. Shelly, it's so great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Awesome. Well, let's start off. I'd love to learn a bit more about yourself, what your role is at KPMG, aside from the ones that I mentioned. Maybe I missed something, and just kind of get the audience to get to know you a little bit. So maybe tell us a little about that and where you're based as well.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm based in Vancouver, BC. And as you mentioned, I'm a senior manager at KPMG. So I really focus on innovation, strategy, and emerging technology, and as the lead of our Ignition Center. So maybe I'll just give a little bit of background on the Ignition Center. We launched the center about 2 years ago, and it was actually the first one in Canada. So we were really excited to be able to bring it to Vancouver specifically. But it's part of a global network of innovation centers that we have within the KPMG network. So at the moment, I believe we have about 27 of these types of centers around the world. And we are planning to roll out new centers in Canada as well in the coming years. So we're really excited to be able to continue to grow this area of the firm. As you know, a focus for us is really, as our clients are starting to kind of transform, everything is becoming digital, it's really important for us to be able to evolve and support our clients as well. So innovation and digital transformation is a huge focus for the firm.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And can you tell us a bit more about how KPMG Ignition is structured? Because from my understanding, it's like, although it's part of KPMG, it's actually quite separated out from an operations and process standpoint. And just for the people who are going to be listening, out of I'm sure their curiosity, I'd love to know in terms of how effective was that in terms of separating out this kind of division, whether it benefited or it hurt the initiative in any way, and also would you kind of recommend something like that being done at other enterprises?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it can really go either way, right? So I'll first speak to KPMG and then maybe talk a little bit about external enterprises. But I think like for us, the distance has helped, especially because at KPMG, it's a global firm, right? So as you can imagine, there are benefits to being a global organization. Mm-hmm. But in the case of Ignition, we're trying to do something that's so different to the core services of the firm that in this case, it really did benefit us to be able to create something that was a little bit separate. But I mean, at the end of the day, we work very closely with our consulting practice, our data science team that is called Lighthouse. So that's our practice area that's comprised of all of our data scientists, our engineers, software developers, the ones who really work on building our emerging technology platforms and solutions. And so in that sense, we are closely aligned and work very closely with our teams as well as the clients of KPMG. But it gives us an opportunity to do things differently. And so that's why there's some form of, separation, which I do think is important. But ultimately, we need to be working towards a common goal and working towards the firm's objectives. So I think, in terms of external organizations, I would suggest that depending on the type of organization you have, you may want to create something that is separate. Because that allows for experimentation. There's less risk involved when you're working on something that's new, a new business model, product or service, where you have the opportunity to, we always talk about failing and failures, right, in innovation. And I think that having that opportunity to experiment and possibly fail is important, but it's about failing fast and then learning quickly so that you can move on. But ultimately, I believe that any innovations team strategy, it needs to align to the corporate strategy so that everyone's working towards a common goal and solving for the right problems.
Mm-hmm. And when KPMG Ignition was created, what was the mandate around it that was set out?
So we had the benefit of being able to really learn from the other centers that were created around the world. So the Ignition Center itself is made up of two distinct focus areas. So the way that we did it in the past with a physical space was that we have an Ignition Center, and that is comprised of an innovation lab. So that area or space is dedicated to thinking about more disruptive trends and innovation strategy, and kind of building out those products or services depending on what our clients are looking for. And then we have what we call an insight center, and the insight center is all about data. So it's how can you leverage your data within your organization to create efficiency? How do you yield the most amount of results from your data? How do you monetize your data? And that's where a lot of the emerging technology solutions come out of as well. So we spend a lot of time working on solutions like with AI, machine learning, and advanced analytics. And so that's kind of how the structure is built out within the Ignition Center. And so the mandate for us was to continue to support the firm in terms of digital transformation and innovation. Talent is a huge objective for us, right? So KPMG traditionally is an accounting and professional services firm, right? But we are heavily invested in strategic hires and growing based on what our clients need. And so our Lighthouse practice, which is our team of data scientists, is the fastest growing practice area for us. So talent is a huge objective for us. And then impact as well, right? So everything we do and the clients that we work on, we have the opportunity to focus on impacting the communities that we work and live in. So that's also a really important objective for the Ignition Center.
And it's really impressive the way that KPMG has been able to separate out to these kind of different initiatives, which is quite rare. I mean, so you guys are definitely further ahead in the pack, I think. I want to talk about design thinking. I know you're a big advocate for design thinking. For the people who probably are going to be listening and don't know what it is, can you maybe start off by telling us your definition of design thinking and how you think it's best used, whether at KPMG or externally?
Sure, yeah. So I am absolutely an advocate of design thinking. So to me, it's a human-centered approach to really solving any complex challenge. So I think that it helps you understand the problem. You're focusing on the unmet needs of your users. So when you're designing a product or service, you really need to understand what it is that your end users are going to need from that product or service. And so design thinking takes you through a phased approach that isn't necessarily sequential. It's meant to be very iterative. And the reason being is that you're always validating and testing. So once you understand and define the problem statement, you're going through this process that is iterative to always ensure that you are going back to that initial problem statement and validating, your hypothesis and understanding that whatever you're solving for is going to actually meet those needs and solve the root problem.
Mm-hmm. And so how can you share in terms of how KPMG utilizes design thinking without kind of going into any specific details on the client side or anything like that, but just high level, like what's the process that you kind of go through from infancy to like, potential execution or build?
Yeah. So, I mean, the great thing about design thinking is that it forces us to be empathetic, right? So when we're solving without assumption, and I think, if we think about everything that we're currently facing, COVID has presented a unique opportunity. It has challenges that are affecting our health, our economy. And I can't think of a better approach to try to solve these very complex problems than using something like design thinking, because COVID requires us to be empathetic and understand that the challenges are, one, something that we've never faced before, but also are quite different in different circumstances. So for us at KPMG, we use design thinking and the methodology in all of the work that we do in the Ignition Center. So it's everything from solving, complex problems. We use it for corporate strategy. So when we do strategic planning sessions with our clients, we take the design thinking approach to even coming up with a strategic roadmap. And I think that's an interesting and unique way to use the methodology, because traditionally, it's been focused on product development. But I think that in this sense that at the end of the day, our strategic priorities are meant to be solving for our customers' needs, right? So it does align quite well. So we really use it in all of the work that we do, including when we're trying to develop proof of concepts or tease out use cases for our data and analytics team.
Mm-hmm. So can you maybe tell us in terms of what does that innovation funnel looks like? Because innovation can have, different types of ideas that can come around us. So there's like a very big top of funnel, in some organizations in terms of, okay, let's just put everything in there, right? So this could be like the rough idea stage. And then, it trickles down over time towards like, let's create the business use case, let's create a proof of concept, a POC, and then like, it goes to like an MVP or something. Like, is that something maybe you could tell us in terms of how does that look like at KPMG? Like, how do you do those funnels? How much time does it take to get through each kind of funnel? Mm-hmm. Just so that, we have a good reference.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's a good question because it's actually, I think, a little different for us and the way that our team is structured. So, we're fortunate to have a pretty diverse client base at KPMG. So our team is client facing, right? So while we do help to support the firm's innovation objectives, that's really an extension of the work that we do with our clients. And so when we're working on a rough idea or building out a business case, it's usually on behalf and working and collaborating with one of our clients. And so I think that's maybe a slight nuance that's different for innovation teams at other organizations where they're usually innovating for internal purposes and products and solutions. So our funnel, with that being said, it is still heavily focused on, looking at those disruptive trends, understanding the impacts, external impacts to anyone's organization, and then starting to build out and kind of ideate those big ideas, right? And we take it from a big blue sky idea, and then we start to distill that into something that's a little bit more solidified that they can then action as part of their strategic roadmap. So I think in terms of the breakdown, I would say it's probably heavily weighted on the rough idea and business case development. And then the way that our team works is once we've identified a use case, then what we do is in collaboration with our other teams, like our lighthouse practice or consulting practice, they're the ones that will take those use cases and then start to build out those POCs. So our team is, I guess, more involved in the development and the sales funnel rather than the actual POC. And we typically don't get involved in the development of an MVP.
Okay, that's fantastic. And so if your team's working on like the initial kind of ideation or like the rough ideas, can you share with us some tools or research data that you use, whether at KPMG, that you find really helpful that other people can like look at as like a way to get the initial primary data from in order to help their own businesses and their industries to see what they should be looking at in terms of idea generation for their organizations?
Yeah, so I mean, so I think the design thinking methodology is a really helpful tool because there are a number of activities, and so when we're working through a rough idea, we structure sessions, and those sessions are essentially workshops. But within a workshop, we design it so that we build out very specific activities that we want to take a client through that will ultimately lead to the prioritization of those big ideas. So that tool in itself is really just a combination of us understanding what the challenge is and then designing a workshop that's going to help to solve that challenge, or at least help to draw out those ideas. User research is really important, and so we have research teams. We recently actually just hired a data and research analyst for our team. KPMG is quite large, right? So we have a number of resources that we can kind of work with to get a lot of that research done. So usually we're researching things like the industry, macro trends, as well as, disruptive technologies that may impact that particular client in a specific industry. And then we're doing user research in terms of a very, specific challenge that we're trying to solve for. So that's a lot of the work that we do up front. And then it's really about designing that session that's going to help to kind of draw out those ideas and then work towards a use case development. And the great thing about it is that it happens in a very rapid fashion. And so we're able to yield results in a fairly short amount of time, which is obviously beneficial to the clients that we work with.
Because they see like quick results, quick wins, or small wins, right? With a rapid turnaround time. And so once you have the use cases, how do you go and validate them? Are you able to touch base with some of the clients that the end user clients to kind of run it by them and see if there's some legs, with some ideas or not before kind of going forward to the next stage?
Yeah, that's definitely part of the process, right? So it's all about validation. And I think that's also why it's really important to kind of get to the use case in a very short order so that you can go through and validate. And then also proof of concepts really help with that as well, because we can help to develop a proof of concept. Then we're always validating the hypothesis and then going through the iterations and making changes to the solution based on what we're hearing back in terms of feedback. So yeah, we definitely build that into the process. And we will usually create the phases. So if we have an engagement, it goes through different phases, which starts with a proof of concept, and then we're going through and iterating, and then we move towards, creating that MVP. And then from there, it's implementation. And implementation could be in a very specific area with a narrow scope. And then we understand, whether or not the solution's working, and then we have an opportunity to kind of implement across the organization depending on the solution.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, great. That's very valuable insight. Thanks so much, Shelly. With this year that we are close to finishing, put it in our past,
Yeah.
a lot of businesses, a lot of industries went through a lot of uncertainty with the whole pandemic and with COVID changing different organizations, from every aspect. How have you seen this impact your own clients? Or, do you think it'll be business back to usual for your team once eventually we have the vaccine? And for that matter, how does this impact innovation in general, around the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all really great questions. And so I think we will not go back to business as usual, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, right? So I think there's obviously a lot of uncertainty. And that tends to create instability and anxiety for all of us, our clients included. But I think that COVID has definitely changed the world. And so in my opinion, if we go backwards, then we aren't really learning, right? So going back to business as usual, to me, is going backwards. And I think that we need to take this as an opportunity to say, now we have the license. We have the license, especially for innovation teams. We have the creative license to push boundaries and to really impact change. And I think it's something that we should all be excited about. And personally, I'm optimistic about the future, but I know that there's still a lot of uncertainty. But I do think that things are going to get better. I think, like, if we think about prior pandemics or even the 2008 recession, after the 2008 recession, there was a ton of innovation that happened, right? And I think we have to remind ourselves that companies like Uber were formed, Slack, which we know just went through a massive IPO with Salesforce, or an acquisition. WhatsApp was developed in 2009, I think, right? So it seems like a lifetime ago. And I can't imagine like what life would be without WhatsApp. But with that being said, this is our opportunity to transform, right? So I think that things are going to be different. I mean, for our team, in a matter of weeks, we transformed our entire service delivery model to be virtual, right? So we spent all of our time in the Ignition Center, bringing clients into the center and doing the work that we do with our clients. But then we went into lockdown and had to move to a remote model. And we took that opportunity to transform the way that we work with our clients. And it honestly has been I think it's made our team better because of it, right? We've increased our capability. And now we're able to deliver sessions using tools like Mural for collaboration and going through all of that ideation. And I think personally, it's been a better experience.
Mm-hmm. Where would you say, I mean, for next year, I mean, with the clients that you're working with or things like that, or that you're not working with, where should everybody's focus be at an enterprise level right now? What do they need to prepare for in order to be successful for next year?
Yeah, great question. I think organizations really need to be focused on the customer. I think that it is all about delivering value to our customers. As I said, going backwards is not an option. And when I say customer, I refer to both our internal and our external customers, right? So I think things like from an internal perspective in operations, we all had to move to a remote work model. And it's important that organizations and leaders start thinking about whether or not that is something that is going to be suitable for the future. So whether that's a fully remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, it creates an opportunity for a lot of us. I mean, even for KPMG, where, I would say 90% of our team members worked within our offices, right? And then all of a sudden we transformed in a matter of weeks, and it's like 8,000 people all of a sudden are working remotely, but it can be done. So I think we have to ask ourselves, what's the best fit for our teams, for our employees, and then thinking about what that experience is going to be, both for our customers as well as our employees.
Mm-hmm. With that said, how can companies, and you've already talked about some of these points, but what else can companies do in order to be more customer-centric if they are already doing it, or if they're not kind of doing that right now?
Yeah, so I mean, I think gone are the days where we can rely on brand loyalty as far as our customers are concerned, right? There's a lot of options, and it's easy to access products, services, and experiences. And so I think what's happening now is that customers, their behaviors are changing, and they're expecting more out of the brands that they are loyal to, or the experiences they have. And that goes all the way from, the public to the private sector. But even in the public sector, if we think about the citizen experience, like citizens want the same experience that they have from like Amazon as they do for their government services, right? And so we have to be thinking about what that experience is like. I think creating an offline and online experience that kind of interacts at different points within, the overall value chain, I think is really important. And I just think that personalization is what customers expect. So looking for ways to create personalization. Obviously digital interface is a must. And so if you focus on all of those things, then I think you work towards creating those sticky customers, which is really important, obviously considering, our current landscape.
That's fantastic. I want to kind of switch to maybe some more personal questions about your own growth, your own learning. I know you're a big advocate of design thinking, and we talked about it. What is something that you wish you knew about design thinking when you kind of first started, exploring it or doing it in real life?
Yes, well, that's a really good question. I wish I knew about design thinking before I learned about it, because I think that throughout your life, you are faced with challenges and problems that you need to try to solve and work through, right? And I think had I had these tools when I was much younger, maybe life wouldn't have been so challenging. I don't know, but I think definitely like it's taught me. I mean, what it's taught me, especially in my personal life, is that we can't go into things with assumptions, right? And being empathetic and understanding that we're all human should be at the forefront of everything that we do. And I think design thinking really requires you to be in a quite vulnerable space, which is uncomfortable for people, right? I mean, think about in our world, we're dealing with corporate executives, and then you start taking them through this design thinking process, and it's quite touchy feely, and so it can be a little uncomfortable. But I think when we're in uncomfortable positions, that's really when we have the opportunity to challenge ourselves and learn. So I wish I would have known about known about design thinking much earlier in life.
Okay. On that same topic, what do you think is some of the biggest misconceptions around design thinking? And like, what would you say to like the skeptics out there who are like non-believers per se?
Yeah. Well, it's probably a little bit of what I just said, right? Because it is an emotional process. And so I think people would be skeptic about, how we can't just rely on emotions, which I agree with, right? But I think it's finding a balance between the emotional part of it and then also being analytical, right? Because you need that balance to really to create effective change. And so I think that perhaps if people don't see the balance or see the value, then they might not think that it's something that could be used to develop a corporate strategy. But with that being said, it's also traditionally always been used in a product development type of environment. So I think that people who aren't necessarily familiar with it are the other ways that you can use it. Because really it's just a human-centered approach to design. That's all it is, right? And it doesn't have to be strictly around developing, the next iPhone.
Okay. I want to ask this question. It's about how to keep innovation, or a larger organization, how to get actually employees to enable employees to be able to get their ideas out in front of the decision makers. Because a lot of organizations have, adopt innovation theater. They say they're doing it, they talk about it, but like they don't actually, really do like a bottom up approach, to be able to really foster innovation within their own culture. What ideas or what suggestions would you want to give towards organizations who are struggling with this, or employees who are struggling with getting their perspectives heard? Any kind of tips there?
Yeah, so I think we often talk about culture, right? But what does that really mean? So I think that it has to be a shift in a mindset for the leaders of the organization, and there needs to be some sort of a vehicle or platform where you can allow your employees to ideate, so give them time to ideate, but then also have some sort of platform where they can engage and put their ideas forward, right? So I think in a lot of organizations, if you have junior staff members, they're maybe not so comfortable to go to a senior leader and say, well, I think this is a really great idea. Which is fine, but then we need to remove those barriers, right? So if you have some sort of platform with like a tool where you can ingest all of the ideas and you do a crowdsourcing essentially within the organization, I think that's a really great way to capture ideas, because people have really great ideas, but they're not always comfortable coming forward with them in meetings. So just giving them a platform where they can share, and then creating some structure around how you manage that pipeline, right? So having a team, perhaps it should be your innovation team, where that's part of their mandate and they're part of their agenda to really manage the pipeline of all of these crowdsourced ideas, and then start to build them out. And also don't be afraid to also give people the opportunity to say, well, we tried to solve for this problem, but it isn't actually working. And that's something that Google X does really well. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with their head of engineering. And that's something that really resonated with me, is that when they're looking at the ideas that are submitted by their team members, they actually give everyone an opportunity to say, like, we tried this, but it's not a good idea, so we're not going to move forward, right? And their metrics and their performance metrics are based on whether or not their team members can come to the table and say, actually, I don't think this is a good idea. We should kill it now. So I think that's an interesting flip, right? And that, to me, really speaks to the notion of creating a culture where it's okay to experiment and fail.
Yeah, it's empowering, giving that control and authority back to your own team to make those type of decisions. It's hard, I think, to establish that type of culture and that mindset, but when it does happen, incredible things can happen from any level of an organization, from customer service to sales to the product team. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think that, in my experience, so we run a internal intern program in the Ignition Center. So we give staff members who are in audit, for example, an opportunity to come and do a rotation in the Ignition Center. And that has been such a great experience, because what it brings to light is that someone who is quite analytical, whose their career path is to get their CPA, to be certified, to become an accountant, and they're in audit, you wouldn't necessarily think that that's the right fit for an innovation team. But they come up with the greatest ideas. They have so many ideas, and it always well, I guess I shouldn't still be surprised, but I just think it's so amazing. And if we give everyone an opportunity just to share and to have that creative license to think differently, great things can happen, right? So I think it's been such a huge impact to our teams to be able to create that opportunity within the firm, where otherwise they would kind of just be on that very linear path to, through their career and through their tenure at the firm. So it's, I definitely agree that ideas can come from anywhere, and we should be open to listening.
And how do you stay competitive as an innovation leader? Like, you've been at KPMG for some time, you come from previous roles. I mean, what motivates you to give it your kind of best, freshest ideas every day?
So I really thrive, I think, in a challenging and competitive environment. And I think, so my background, because I came from industry, because I've been in technology my whole career, I think that I bring a slightly unique perspective to the firm. So I think that's definitely been a benefit for me personally, but also at KPMG, every day is different. So we work with clients that span across industry, right? We're industry agnostic in the Ignition Center, at the firm as well. But we don't have a specific industry group that we focus on like other practice areas do. And so what that allows us to do is always work on different challenges and always come up with different solutions, right? So it keeps me engaged because there's never a day that's the same as the last, right? So it's always different, and I'm always challenged with trying to help clients like solution new ideas. Like one day I could be working with a not-for-profit, helping to serve and deliver programs to underprivileged girls. And the next day I could be working with a major mining company, that has mines across the globe. So it's so vastly different that it definitely keeps me, I think, on my feet. So it's a challenge.
I was going to say,
yeah.
I think innovation in many ways keeps you always at the forefront of like seeing what's on the horizon, what's coming up. Are there any kind of books or training or anything that you do to keep perfecting your craft? Anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely try to stay on top of what's going on in the landscape of technology. So, I spend a lot of time just looking at different mediums for information, right? Because a lot of people rely on me to be kind of put those ideas forward to understand, what the landscape is like in terms of emerging technology. I'm a big fan of artificial intelligence. I think that it's going to create huge opportunity, but I also think that we need to, which we've already had, there are a lot of thought leaders that are thinking about the implications of artificial intelligence. And I think that's a really important conversation, thinking about AI ethics and how it's going to affect humanity. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Life After Google.
Okay.
It's a terrifying book. So it definitely keeps me up at night. So I should not read it at night, but you have to take it in small doses. But it is a very, very interesting read. And I would recommend that everyone does read it if they haven't already, because it shines a light on what's actually happening with some of these large tech companies and some of those, concerns that we should have around data and, our overall humanity and survival.
For sure. And when you're stuck, when you hit a roadblock, who do you turn to for advice when you need it the most?
Yeah, I have two really great mentors. So one is my managing partner. And so I report directly to the managing partner here in Vancouver. And he's extremely supportive, but also not afraid of doing things differently, right? So he grew up at the firm. He's a tax partner by trade, and now the managing partner of the Greater Vancouver area. But he's like a visionary, so I definitely turn to him when I'm stuck. And as well, my other mentor is our president and managing partner of KPMG Digital. And he came to the firm a few years ago. He also came from industry, and it was in technology prior to joining the firm. And him and I often spend a lot of time talking about Horizon 3, right? And actually recently we had a conversation, and we were talking about my personal life and kind of where I'd like to be in the next few years. And when we talk about the different horizons, we're usually talking about technology, right? And the impacts to, your organization or whatever it might be. But what he said is that I should actually be thinking about my own life in Horizon 1, 2, and 3. And I thought that was really interesting. And so, I now have to go away and think about what my Horizon 3 is going to be, which isn't the easiest question to answer. So
For sure.
Yeah, so definitely, like, though, I would say those two individuals are the ones that I turn to the most.
Awesome. And what events kind of led you down this path towards innovation?
So, yeah, I thought about this question, and I don't often talk about my life or my journey before KPMG, but my life has been, I guess, a bit unconventional. And so I think that everything that I've done has led me to this particular place. I feel like I've kind of been innovating my whole life, mainly out of struggle, but, nonetheless, it's working through things. So, I guess I'll take you a little bit through the journey. I became an entrepreneur at the age of 16. To be fair, it wasn't a successful venture, but I did it and it was a great experience. And then I think if we kind of fast forward through that, I decided based on my circumstances that I wasn't going to go to university right after high school. So I decided to work instead. And I had the opportunity to land my first real, I guess, start to my career, which was at a tech company. But I actually started as a receptionist and I had no idea about tech or SaaS software. I didn't even know what it meant when I first started. And so I landed there and I was with that company for 9 years. I think that I held 6 different roles within the organization.
Oh, wow.
Went through IPO with them, went back to private, went through, I think, 20 or 25 acquisitions during my tenure there. And I left the organization as a implementation manager, managing 4 different SaaS products, and went over to NBC Universal to manage the SaaS products for their golf technology arm, which is called Golf Now. And then from there, I went on to work for a startup, and then I landed at KPMG. So, and between that, I did actually go back to school. Went to BCIT and finished my degree there, but it was a little unconventional. I wasn't really sure what I was going to be doing. I didn't necessarily have a defined path for myself, which is why I think that everything I've gone through has led me to today, because it's been, challenging, and I'm constantly, I think, having to innovate myself, right? To kind of move into a different role, to have new experiences that I've never had before. So I think it's just given me the opportunity to really be adaptable and think differently.
It's an amazing kind of journey you went through. And I think it's encouraging for people to know that getting into an innovation role at an organization isn't a clear path, and that you can start off, as you said, you start off as a receptionist, but then you didn't know tech, right? So like, you don't have to know tech and go to school for it right away to get into this field eventually. So that's great to hear. I didn't know that story. So thanks for sharing that.
I know, absolutely. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think it's so important, especially for young women, because I think that when we think about innovation or technology, we think that everyone needs to be a programmer, or a developer, and that's not necessarily the case. I dabbled a little bit in programming and managed products, but it definitely wasn't something that I went to school for, right, or have formal training in. And so I think it's really important for young women to understand that there's so many different career paths within technology, and they shouldn't feel like they have to be a data scientist to move forward. Although I do think it's very important that everyone has some training now in data science and programming.
Awesome. Before we wrap up, Shelly, I always like ending these events with these quickfire questions, which are basically one-liner kind of tidbit, golden nugget kind of things that people can always walk away with to do and implement in their jobs or in their careers. So the first one I have is, what should innovation leaders at an organization stop doing right away, like as of tomorrow?
stop trying to innovate without any focus.
Okay, cool. And what should they start doing right away?
Yeah, I guess the exact opposite. Create sustainable innovation programs that are aligned to corporate objectives.
Okay. And then in terms of like trends that you see, anything to look forward to in the next couple of years that you think people should start looking into and dabbling in terms of a knowledge base to potentially have a potential thriving growth in?
Yeah, so I think what I mentioned earlier, I think data is gold. And so if you can position yourself in a way that you can help either your own organization or the clients that you work with yield results from the data that they have, because we're all data rich, I think that's a really important trend that will continue for years to come.
I agree. I couldn't agree with that more. Okay, cool. This has been amazing, Shelly. I really appreciate your time, your knowledge that you've shared with me and with everybody who's going to be listening to this. So thanks again. And for everybody listening, tune in to hear more about different perspectives from innovation professionals in their journeys in life and in their careers that they have in different organizations on our next few episodes coming out after. So once again, Shelly, thank you so much. And it was great chatting with you.
Thanks so much.